Welcome back, nail queens. So today's video is going to be the third video in my Gelly Tip application beginner basic series. That was a mouthful, but if you haven't watched the first two videos, I'll link the playlist down in the description box below. I definitely recommend starting at the first video and then working your way down the series. So today's video is going to cover prepping the nail tip and then prepping the nail for Gelly Tip application. I decided to put both of them into one video rather than two separate videos because it's talking about prepping nails and prepping tips. So it's just prep work, the prep work to do this. So it felt silly to break it into two videos. And just like any nail enhancement that you use and put on your nails, it is very important to properly prep your nails for long lasting wear so you don't experience lifting or popping off. Since you're working with a tip, you also have to prep the tips to ensure that those don't pop or peel off really easily because it can happen. I mean, it's happened to me. If you guys need to jump ahead to a specific part in the video, I'm definitely going to have time codes listed in the description box below. So if you need to skip straight to prepping the nail, just go down there, click the time, and it'll fast forward you, okay? So if you guys are interested in learning about this topic, keep on watching. So the first thing I need to do is prep the jelly tips. It's very important to etch the underside of the jelly tips. So in order to do that, I am going to be using an e-file today, but I'm going to demonstrate how you can do that if you don't have an e-file. You can purchase sanding bands without having an e-file. You don't need to use the mandrel bit. So you can use a sanding band and put it on a larger cuticle pusher. And you can use the cuticle pusher to help you have enough force to etch the underside of the tip. Mind you, obviously this is not as easy as using an e-file, which is why I recommend getting one. You can find rather inexpensive ones on Amazon for as low as like $10. And that might be worth it if all you plan on using the e-file for is for etching the underside of your tips. So I'm going to put my sanding band back on my mandrel bit and use the e-file to file and etch the underside of my jelly tips. I'm going to show you guys how I use this with my sanding band, but I am going to switch over to a different tip drill bit later on because I really like this other drill bit, not only for really etching some great grooves under my jelly tips, but also for the smaller sizes. If you notice that the mandrel bit is not fitting well in your smaller size jelly tips, I highly recommend picking up this cone bit that I'm going to show you in a few because it really helps on the smaller sizes. So this is a medium grit comb bit, and it's very important that you know the grit to your drill bits so that you know how gritty it's going to be and how much damage or etching it can do to the surface of what you're trying to etch it on. So I'm using this to etch the inside of my jelly tips. I know I just used the mandrel bit and the sanding bands to etch the inside, but if you really want to etch some great grooves in there, I recommend using this cone bit. Be very careful if you etch in the same spot way too many times, you can obviously file through the jelly tip. So just give it a light pass on all of the tips from the free edge down to the cuticle area. Don't do it too much, but it really does an incredible job at getting you great grooves. And the reason why having these grooves is very important is because gel does not like to stick to smooth surfaces. So if your jelly tip is too smooth, you might experience the jelly tip just popping off clean off of your builder gel. You don't want that to happen. So now I'm going to demonstrate the difference between the mandrel bit and the cone bit on how they work with these really tiny jelly tip sizes. So if you have a very small nail bed, you might need the cone bit and not the mandrel bit. So I'm going to try the smallest size here, and it's going to give me a really hard time getting in the concave groove of this jelly tip. I won't be able to file the surface or the underside of the jelly tip. So this is why I highly recommend getting the cone golden bit. So if you use the smaller sizes, this is the kind of drill bit that you're definitely going to want and need to file your jelly tips. So after you've etched all of your jelly tips, you're going to want to dust them all off, the underside and the top side, And the reason for this is because we're about to apply some primer to the underside in a couple minutes, and you don't want it sticking to dust. You want a completely clean surface. So this part is optional, but you can use a hand file or your e-file and just rough up the surface of the cuticle area and the sidewalls, the areas that really come in contact with your skin. And the reason why you want to do this is kind of make that area more flush and thin it out a little bit so it's more flush and creates a seamless line from your cuticle all the way to the free edge once you apply it to the nail. You're going to want to use a gel primer to put on the underside of your tips. This one is from the Painted Desert and it is HEMA free. So when I use the primer on the underside of my jelly tip, I don't douse the jelly tip in it. I don't float on the product. I specifically and deliberately scrub using the brush. I'm scrubbing the primer into the jelly tip. If you try this at home, try floating it on and then also try etching it in there, like really scrubbing it in there, and you're going to notice a huge difference on what the primer does to the jelly tip. It's really helping etch those grooves even more, and what it's going to do is leave a nice tacky surface, which is a great preparation for the gel that you're going to use for it to stick to. It's really going to help ensure that the jelly tip sticks to the gel that you're using. Now part 2 of this video is prepping the natural nail for jelly tip application. I have short nails and I recommend the shorter the better. So the first thing you want to do is clean your nails. I'm using rubbing alcohol and a paper towel. Just really clean them off, disinfect, sanitize, get all the oils off the natural nail. My nails are pretty short and they're really dry. This is what happens every single manicure. It just does not look great. I'm sorry about that. So what I do now that they're all dehydrated is I take the primer that I showed earlier and I apply 2 coats onto my natural nail. So you're seeing me apply 1 coat here, and I'm going to go in and apply 1 coat to all of my fingers and then go back to my thumb and work my way back down, applying a 2nd coat. Remember, the primer dries tacky. It won't be completely dry, and that is normal. You do not want the primer to touch your skin. You don't want to flood your nail. Make sure you apply thin layers and kind of really etch it in there the way you did with the jelly tips. The next step is to apply gel base to your natural nail after the primer has had enough time to basically air dry. So apply a thin layer of gel base to your nail. Make sure you don't touch your skin with the gel. You never want gel to touch your skin. So just apply a thin layer. You don't want to also douse it on your nail. And then cure in your nail lamp for the allotted amount of time, which is for me 60 seconds. Now, depending on the brand you're using, you might or might not have to do this step. Painted Desert recommends taking a thin layer of cactus jelly and then putting it on your nail and then curing for 60 seconds. You can also use builder gel if you want. So I'm using the builder gel here just to show you guys that it'll work if you use builder gel as well. Paint on a very thin layer. It doesn't have to be super thick. And then of course, cure for the full allotted time in your nail lamp, which is 60 seconds for me. Stay tuned next week for part 4. Thank you guys so much for watching that video. I hope it helped answer your question on how to prep your full coverage jelly tips or how to prep your nails for applying those jelly tips to your nails. If you guys have any unanswered questions or anything that I left out, definitely ask it in the comment box below and I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you guys so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.